Good morning. I think I know everyone here, but if there's those who haven't met me, I'm Mike Higgins. I've been honored to be a director and president this past year, and I'll be doing my best to keep the meeting on track today. So let's get rolling. The plan is simple. We're going to have a 2-hour safety session where our instructors and some of our chief staff people will be talking to us about best practices and other things to sharpen us up going into the season. We'll have a short break and then have about a 1-hour business meeting. The safety meeting is mandatory, so please stay with the group here, pay attention, and stick with it. We're going to try to keep it concise, no more than 2 hours to have a break. At that point, if you feel obliged to leave, you're welcome to, but we're then going to have a business meeting, which is also important, so I hope everyone stays for that as well. An important thing to do is to sign in. Holland over here, our secretary, has the sign-in sheet. Has everyone signed in? If you don't sign in, we're going to require that you watch the video of this safety presentation and then pass a short test. So everybody signed in, that's good. A couple of other quick announcements before we start. Dave Weaver, who's planning to take one of our K-21s to the Mifflin contest in May, has asked that those interested in joining him at that contest stay in this meeting room afterwards so they can have a brief meeting to talk about that. And I think that's it. Let's go ahead and start with the safety meeting. Paul, you're up first. Paul Ream, Master Instructor, Senior Instructor.
Hey, welcome you all to the safety meeting for 2018. We're a little pressed for time, and so my speaking portion of this I'm going to almost delete, and I'm going to have you read through a list of items that we've seen, incidents we've seen at our club, and discuss this with an instructor, or any of us, and we'll be happy to go forward with this. With that, I'd like to move forward here. Safety incidents, seasons. A fair number of these have had instructors in them, and I am in that list.
That's all right. It's an old way.
Some of these issues are, pretty serious. Kiting on tow is been lethal over the years, and we're going to have John Mockner talk a little bit about this from the towing perspective. And we've seen some recurring patterns at the field, mostly due to winds, I think. A lot of the things that we see are just in here as a general group, loss of control, not understanding what the winds are going to do to you, which is going to lead into our next speaker, who is Glenn Collins, who has prepared a nice set of slides about this. And he also put an article into Convector, which I haven't yet been able to read, but I read his drafts. So Glenn, why don't you come on up?
That's the shortest Paul's ever talked.
Geez, we gotta archive that tape.
Press it.
Yeah. Press it on the screen.
Slide out the slide.
All right, so Paul had asked me to put something together about landing, particularly the effects of the wind. Last year in particular, we saw a number of scary incidents. We got lucky, none of them caused any damage. But we've seen the whole gamut from experienced pilots on down. So in doing flight reviews, flying with a bunch of people, doing training through the years, I think most of us starting to see a trend that people just aren't taking into account the wind until it's obvious to them that they're being affected. They're not planning for it. So that's what I'm going to try to focus on here. So when do you start planning your landing?
Before you take off.
Yeah, before you take off, maybe even driving to the field. You're taking a look at, what the winds are doing, what the fields look like, because, I say that here, planning your landing, it kind of implies you're coming back to the field, but, no, it doesn't always work that way.
All right.
But, yeah, so, we say that, and somebody immediately chimed in before you take off, but I know when I fly with folks, we're like on downwind when the first gears start to move about what they're going to do next. And I think we need to move that out a little, get that done a little bit earlier in more cases than not. And what do you strive for? What does your traffic pattern look like? Yeah, I think one of the important things here, we always preach, we publish the standard rectangular pattern and all, and that's a great goal. But it's not always achievable, right? We've all seen instances, and about half the people in the room have lived through instances, where you've cashed everything you had in to fly that perfect rectangular pattern and go into the canned IP when you really didn't have the altitude to do it. And you end up coming in extremely low, or in some cases not making it back. Also, once you get into the pattern, what corrections are you making? What's the biggest things causing you to do a correction? Yeah, wind, and the next one's probably a conflict in the pattern. Okay.
Or poor planning to start with.
Yeah. Or lack of planning is usually, you're making it up as you're going along, and unfortunately that does happen. So one of the things we've been pushing with the flight instructor clinics and all for years is the notion of the goal-oriented approach in landing. And that's, the objective here is you want to end your flight and you want to do it stopping at a predetermined spot. And of course, the aircraft and pilot you want them to be reusable in a reasonable amount of time. And landing is where it all comes together. I got a little flippant thing here about, nobody ever talks to you about all the other stuff you did in your flight. But, every time you land, everyone's watching. Everyone's watching every landing. And there's a scorecard. And they are precision maneuvers. You really got to work at them in order to get this to work. And the best way to do that is having consistent procedures, and that will help you have the consistent results. So what's the first thing you think about when you're approaching the airport to land? You know you're going to land. You may be a mile or two away yet, up, by the quarry or something.
Options.
Available space.
Okay. So the way I've listed it out here, what are my wins, and how am I going to let down into that environment? One of the things I personally don't like is coming into the airport high and either spiraling down or using dive brake. I don't want to descend on somebody. I like to get my altitude used up away from the field and then come in. How am I going to enter? I've watched time and time again folks decide, here's my IP, and they start heading to it. Well, they're 180 degrees out from where they want to be on downwind, and they head right to that IP with no turning room. Now they try to turn the thing on a dime. Well, you can't. And now they're either extremely tight or extremely wide because they didn't build that into the plan. And then so even if they had a good plan prior to that going in, they just flushed it because they've flustered themselves now that they're not where they wanted to be. And it's catch-up the rest of the way. And that's when they start missing stuff and they get further and further behind. So you got to plan that turning room and do that through picking how you're going to enter. Always have a plan B, C, and a D. You're on downwind, you got a guy out ahead of you. He's turning base as you enter in downwind. He's on final, you're turning base. He ground loops and closes the runway you were going to land on. and the cars are all heading his way, so everything's blocked. What's the first thing you do?
Close the dive brakes.
Yeah, close the dive brakes. And then figure out where you're going. Hopefully you already had a plan and you're going to sidestep over to the other runway. Checklist usage, have a plan how you're going to have that out of the way. You want to get all that taken care of, everything configured as you're entering the, prior to getting on downwind. Obviously configuration changes may happen on downwind or even on base. And then how you're going to execute it and just follow through with the execution. So mechanics, obviously have a plan. I've said that how many times already in the last 5 minutes. Then strive to fly the plan. Okay? Everything's going to try to get you off of that plan. So just be flexible. You know that's going to happen. But don't replan it. So if something happens and you come off your plan, don't just throw the plan out. Try to get back onto it. That's particularly true from what I see with people turning on the final. Right? Their plan may be to have a nice extended, the extended center line for the runway, but because of one reason or another, now they're angling in. Right? Don't angle to your touchdown point. Get yourself back to where you can get on that center line, because if you got a crosswind, you're going to want to have that view of it in order to make sure you've killed all your drift. And I do advocate the rectangular pattern. We're going to talk about that, but it gives you a lot of options that you can play with as needed, again, to achieve that goal of the reusable pilot and glider. So here's your basic rectangular pattern. You got a notional IP out there that gives you enough turning room to do a decent base leg. You want to fly a parallel course to the runway, perpendicular for base, and some semblance of a final on the extended center line. What we see is these angling ones coming in like this, and that's taken away a lot of your options, and we'll talk about some of the impacts of that. First thing you want to do in setting this up is figure out where you want to stop. Right? Different airports can be different places. It may be midfield at a taxiway because you're going to push off to the side. And then in order to stop there, figure out where you have to touch down. Right? So you have to know a little bit about what you're flying and the conditions. So if I touch down at this point, I'm going to have no trouble stopping at this point without excessive use of the brake. And then in order to touch down there, I got to aim somewhere. So have your aim point. So now you're set up and you know how you're going to fly the rest of this pattern. Well, when was the last time anyone flew without wind? Right? It's always working. So, what's wind?
Exactly.
It's out there to mess you up. So, comes in a couple of different variants when we're landing, and we'll look at each of these. And then you add on the dynamic nature of it, where you get the wind gradients and the wind shear. Not going to talk a whole lot about that today. Eric put out the convector yesterday. I've got an article in there about wind shear and wind gradient. And if you got questions on that, we can talk about that later. So if you're landing into a headwind, so here we are, we got a 15-knot headwind for the actual landing. And notion of it. So as you're coming into the airport environment, what's the first thing you're thinking about? So what I'm thinking is, it all starts in here, right? So what's that wind going to do to this event, this activity? Right? I'm going to have a slower touchdown ground speed, right? This means I'm going to have less stopping distance. So I can move this a little bit. not going to need as much room to transition from an aim point to a touchdown because of that wind. So now I've got my terminal phase planned as I'm letting in. Next thing I'm thinking about is less time on downwind. Right? Things are going to happen pretty quick. I got a 15-knot tailwind coming in. Okay, so we got the best case landing here, right? It's pure textbook landing into the wind. Right? It should be really simple. And I see things breaking down because all of a sudden people are getting way behind on downwind because they weren't prepared, and then they make mistakes on base and all that. So I'm going to be moving fairly quick across the ground on downwind. That means I'm going to lose less altitude. Not a bad thing. I can always get rid of altitude. So I don't want to rush it, but I can get rid of it later. What else is that going to do to me in this pattern? Crab? Where? Yeah, on base. Right? But even more important than that initial crab, when you're going to turn. Right? You're going to want to lead that turn because you're going fast, you're going to have a bigger turn radius, and it's going to be working against you. How big is your turn?
Larger.
Right? Are you going to turn perpendicular to the runway?
No.
How come when I fly with you, everyone does? Right? So you're going to have to crab, right? To counteract that wind. So you don't have a 90-degree turn there. Anyone want to take a stab at how much turn you have if you're doing 60? You're going to have a 105-degree turn, but you got a 15-knot wind. You're doing 60, 1 to 60 roll, you're going to have 15 degrees drift. Okay? If you don't plan that, and you wait until you're on base to realize, hey, I'm blowing away, now you got to correct for what you already lost, which, oh, by the way, for most of us, it's over here when we realize it, and it's a little too late to fix it. So, again, you got to plan that ahead of time. So crabbing on base. Now, unlike the wind gradient article I wrote, you also got the McCready speed to fly piece going on in here too, because everything's predicated on how many feet per second you're losing just in the glide. So with the increased airspeed you're carrying with the wind and all that, it's helping the penetration. So you're going to have the same basic amount of time on final. So your natural descent rate is going to be pretty much the same as if you were in a no wind, because you've compensated for it. But you've also got very effective dive brakes and all that, plus going into the headwind. So you have no trouble losing any extra altitude you have. Like I said, for the standard attitude you want, the descent angle that you're looking for, you're actually going to use a little less spoiler to achieve that into a headwind. Now let's look at a tailwind. What's the first thing you're thinking about with a tailwind? You know you're going to land with a tailwind. You're going to have higher touchdown speed. You're going to get a little ground rush. You're going to have a little bit more energy as you start rolling. You got directional control issues, depending on the magnitude of that tailwind. And you're going to need more distance to stop. So that means you're going to have to take this stop point and move it a little bit closer to the approach end of the runway. And although folks may not like having to come get you if you land short, going to fetch you on the runway at midfield is a lot easier than pulling you out of the ditch and fixing the glider if you go long. So if you got that tailwind, be conservative. As you back this thing off, give yourself plenty of room. Likewise, it's going to take more time to get transition from the aim point to the touchdown point. So again, back that off as well. Longer time on downwind means more altitude lost on downwind, so it's probably best not to have a whole lot of dive break out there because you are going to be coming down. And you don't want to get yourself caught short on altitude. It's a lot easier to get rid of altitude on final than it is to get it back. You got the undershooting wind there, so you don't have to lead that turn to base. However, you're going to need to crab on base. So this is going to be less than a 90-degree turn. Again, you see people forgetting that. Now, I've only shown this as a 5-knot tailwind, so you're looking at a 5-degree correction. But you don't want to get in too tight. Again, if you don't take that into account and let yourself drift in, and you have extra altitude and all that, now things are starting to compound as you're coming down with that tailwind with the increased performance. Last time on final, it's going to take more spoiler to get the same descent that you normally would have over the ground. So this is a little bit on the headwinds, tailwinds. The headwind's going to impact, you get yourself low, you're not descending on downwind because of the tailwind. So you open up all your dive breaks, you get rid of all your altitude, now you end up a little bit low on final, and you're penetrating into the headwind and get yourself caught. And then again, you get the wind gradient, which is naturally going to make you come up short. So you may have given up the margin you have to protect from that. Tailwinds are a little bit higher risk because of the ground rush. You are going to be coming in with a higher energy state and touching down with a higher energy state. Control effectiveness at some point in that tailwind is going to be nil, and you may still be moving considerably. And the one thing I'll say here is landing with a tailwind is optional. Okay, probably more true at a conventional airport, where you use both ends of the runway. If you don't like that tailwind, just get traffic turned around and land into the wind. Okay, Fairfield Airport's licensed takeoffs to the southeast, landings to the northwest. You can still land downhill. We do it every now and then in training. It's a viable option. However, if we need to be doing that, we probably shouldn't be out there flying. There shouldn't be any launches if we, happen to come back to land that direction because of the wind. And the soaring is usually not good if the wind's out of the east anyway. But, if things aren't right, don't break an aircraft trying to do something that doesn't make sense. If you're better off going and landing into the wind and then putting them away, do it. It's disruptive if you do it in training, or if you do it in real life. So try to get on the radio, let people know you're going to do that ahead of time so we can all be prepared and get things out of the way. Because, like I said, it is very disruptive to the operation. And anyone that hasn't done it or hasn't done it recently and wants to give it a shot, let one of us know, and we'll be glad to go fly with you and do one. Let's move on to the crosswinds. So here we've got a 10-knot crosswind. Again, first thing you're going to think about. Directional control. Anyone flown the K-21s with the crosswind? What do you think of the crosswind capability of them?
So far, I've fine.
They run out of rudder.
Yeah, you run out of rudder real quick. In Europe, they've got an 8-knot limit on them. Okay, we're better than that. We don't have that here in the States. However, the rudder's the rudder. You only get so much. You actually got a plan for it. You know you could run out. You can correct some of the crosswind drift with putting the wing, slightly down and using your lift vector a little bit. But that's as a fine line, but you can get that right and scaring yourself by putting the wing down onto the ground. You don't want to put the wing on the ground. But they do have a limited amount of rudder authority on rollout. You're going to have to crab on downwind here. Right? So here's trying to blow you away from the airport. You don't want to get away. You're also going to have longer time on base, so you're going to potentially lose a lot more altitude on base, especially if you're flying by road with a set spoiler setup. So you can either move it in a little bit or just plan accordingly and not use the tie brakes. Right? Less lead time, right? If you end up leading this, right, you're setting yourself up for that angling final I said to try to strive away from. So if you do turn early, you find out you're inside that course, go ahead and make the right-hand jog, get yourself back on final. And you're going to have to crab on final. So in this case, it's going to be a little less than a 90. So up at the top there, you got a little bit more than a 90 degree, or a little less than a 90 degree turn coming in. And then over here, it's going to be less as well. All right, here's another flavor of your crosswind. This one here is going to cause you to overshoot in that critical final turn. And again, I ratcheted it up a notch. So obviously directional control is even a bigger player here. That final turn. Again, this is a critical one to crab on the downwind because you don't want to get you blowing you in tighter to the field. Okay, what happens in these, people set their IPs way too close, then they let them drift even closer to where the geometry is not even going to give them a good turn here with a base leg. Then they've got the overshoot, and they end up making this final turn out in here. And that gets into your classic setup where people start to forget everything that was taught to them, and we see the stall spin type accidents. All right, shorter turn time on base, so you can either move out that downwind a little bit. The other thing you might want to think about is flipping your pattern and fly the pattern into the wind on base and give yourself more, right? It's goal oriented. So the goal is to get this thing on the ground safely. So just because somebody put in a book that you're going to fly it on this side, if it makes sense to do it on this side and prevent all those issues we talked about here, then do it. And of course, you got a crab on final.
Hey, Glenn?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the stall spin, for a lot of people may not understand that setup because it is critical. I'm glad you brought that up. Because the problem is, you said, well, why would it be different if the wind was coming from here versus there? And I think a lot of people forget, once you do the overshoot, and let's say you're relatively slower than you want to be or need to be, and you overshoot, a lot of times the tendency is for, like you say, you go back to, you get all discombobulated, and you end up kicking in rudder, you end up trying to bring the nose around to get square with the runway again instead of trying to turn it. And that's where you set up for the stall spin on final, and it's all over with. So very cautious, and I think you got to keep your speed up. And if you do come back and do your correction back to the runway, if you do overshoot, do a coordinated turn. Don't just use rudder to try to get the nose over, because that's the setup right there. So I think that's what we.
Right. So, and again, if you've rethought this and planned it, you should be able to prevent yourself and isolate yourself from that overshoot through proper planning and seeing things early.
And the lower you are, the more apprehensive lower time people are to actually bank an appropriate bank angle for the turn, and that's why you don't get the coordinate.
Right. We could do a whole hour on just setting that up, and the why it happens and a good view of the results. All right, just wrapping up on the crosswinds. You want to fly that stabilized approach coming in. That's why it's important to get on that extended center line so you can see all this. I talked about crabbing in the pattern and all that. You also have the option of a side slip on final, you know, or more realistically, a little bit of both, depending on what you're flying. Real quick here, this just gives you a very realistic, for Fairfield, what we see, and it's a combination of everything. So you've got this quartering wind, so you're going to get the benefit of the slower touchdown, but you still have the directional control. Your distance to stop and transition benefits, but your time on downwind is going to be accelerated. Okay? You're going to be crabbing to the right on downwind, but you're going to need to crab to the left on base. So you're going to have a much larger turn. You got to lead that. Plus you got the increased speed. So you got that big overshoot potential into the base turn. Like I said, crabbing on base so you don't get too far away. And then again, a big crab on, or a big overshoot potential in the final turn. And then crabbing on final. This one here, I also bring it up, the turbulence and wind shear, because you got that winds coming over the trees, coming over the ski hill, all the personalities we have at Whiskey 73. Just real quick, I'm not going to touch on these here, but the turbulence, the wind gradient, and the wind shear. You don't have to have bad weather to have wind shear, and I try to make that point in the article if you haven't had a chance to read it. A couple of the common errors I see is just, either failure to plan for it or just late in applying any type of wind correction. Not recognizing and correcting for the drift. So you may plan on the wind, you put it in, but it's more than you really needed. That means correct for it and take a little bit out, or it's not enough and you need to add a little bit more. So just because you planned it and put something in, don't stop there. Continue to reassess it. Excessive and premature altitude loss. There's still folks out there opening up and flying mechanical half dive break on downwind, and then on final they wish they had altitude. Not understanding the turning room thing. I talked about the scenario where I watch guys coming in from the east all the time, heading right for where they're going to use for the IP, and then they can't get lined up. And then that angle in final. Get yourself on an extended. If you do nothing, get yourself on a nice stabilized final. Everything else is to get you there. But if you can't stabilize that final, you're never going to have a consistent landing. And then low energy approaches. Don't be shallow. Come on in, have a decent amount so it gives you some margin. So you got to work at it. And don't rely on the corrections. Try to plan them and get them out of the way. And prevent the need for them. Like I just said, it's easier to back out excess correction than to add more. All right, so we're at our time limit?
You're ready for questions, you can have 5 minutes.
All right, so we got time for some questions. I also have one real quick scenario we could throw out here. So any questions? Okay, Dan.
So you made a comment on the downwind landings and you said you have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, outside of the massive situation, when would you make that choice to land downwind? When might you? And how important is the downwind piece of that aspect of the
Okay, well, I think you're asking, if I was landing anywhere other than at Whiskey 73, where we have the constraints on the landing pattern.
Think about a land out.
Or land out. Okay, so for land outside, you're not going to want to land downhill is the real biggie. I'd rather land uphill with a tailwind than downhill with a headwind, unless it's really rip-roaring, in which case I'm probably not going to be there anyway. But in general, other than terrain like that, I'm going to go for into the wind whenever I can. You know, one option somebody might throw, well, I want to roll out close to the road for an easy retrieve. That's not a good reason to land downwind. You can always tow the glider to the road or carry it.
Over trees into a short field versus over a fence into a short field.
Yeah.
Well, so you had a point over there on the final crab foundation, crab and slip.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about why you, because there's different philosophies. You know, you crab and you also have to straighten up before you touch down. And then there are other people who say, no, you need to be slipping so you get lined up properly. If you talk about that a bit.
Well, you know, it depends. Right? It depends on what you're flying and all that. You know, if you're flying a real long wing glider with a low set wing, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of slipping. 233, you can slip that thing all you want because the wings are a fairly average length and they're mounted high. I tend to personally roll out with a crab to get stabilized, make sure everything looks good, and then I'll transition to some degree of a side slip and take out a little crab to keep everything in balance. And so I end up using a little bit of both. You know, it depends. It depends on the magnitude of it. You know, you can only counteract so much of the crosswind with the slip in most of the aircraft that we fly that you're going to have to introduce some crab at some point. Speaking of crabs, Andrew.
Well, then you mentioned landing into the wind being the safest scenario. When you're landing into the wind gradient acts against you, does it not? It pulls your airspeed away and you descend through the descending headwind close to the ground. How much do you allow for that when you're planning your approach, say, into a strongish headwind for a final?
Well, you know, I advocate a fairly steep approach. I like about a 10-degree angle on the approach. You know, a lot of you guys are flying, you know, power guys are all flying 2.5 to 3. So if I end up losing a half a degree because I've lost some altitude to a wind gradient, it's not a big deal. So,
sorry, airspeed rather than angle.
right? Well, I'm going to, you know, wind gradient's fairly benign because it's insidious. It's just slowly dropping off as you're coming down, so you end up, instead of flying a straight line, you're going to end up with this little arced line that brings you a little bit short. So you're flying a constant airspeed, so, you know, you're just accelerating through it as you're coming through. You know, I'm not sure I answered your question with that puzzled look, so we can take it offline also and talk.
Is he thinking wind shear, maybe?
He may be.
Have you covered landings, emergency landings, swap and tow, rope break?
That'll be another session. You know, not today, but you know, there'll be plenty of things. We're not going to cover everything today.
What's the latest recommendation? Andrew Headwind, half the wind or all the wind? I never really changed their mind. Is there a recommendation?
146 knots plus 2 knots for every 1,000 pounds of fuel. You know? Oh, wrong airplane. You know, when you work it out, if you use the manufacturer's bug, you know, on the airspeed indicator, you know, if you take 1.3 times the star speed and add half the wind, other people add half the wind plus half the gut. When you work them all out, you're going to all be within 1 knot.
Well, I noticed the 21s don't penetrate like the 103s used to. They just don't have the penetration, so I'm typically going to bump it up a couple of knots into a headwind just to make up for that. Has that been your experience? Have you noticed that?
Instead of just bumping it up into that, I'd also make sure you add some altitude if you're not worried about penetrating. But yeah, no, the K-21s are phenomenal in the sense that they get off the ground really quick and they fly really slow. And they got a big, fat root segment of the wing, and that costs you penetration. And yeah, you can fly their perfect numbers into a heavy headwind and find yourself in the fence if you're not careful. So make sure you have altitude and fly the proper speeds.
And hey, Glenn, for what it's worth, having flown the K-21, it's some serious wind, and I can tell you, if you add all of the wind, you're not going to get in trouble with the K-21, because just what you said, just less mass, slower, and it will slow up pretty quickly once you level the nose off with it. It bleeds off much better than the 103s did. So just keep that in mind, you know, especially if you get yourself caught enough. You're out there and you're in the wind. I mean, I've been at 70, 75 knots with, and it just bleeds right off. So it's not like the 103s. Just when you're, those of you who haven't been checked out, you'll figure that out. So.
All right. So let's wrap this up for the sake of time. I'm going to be around all day. If you get people have questions and all that, we can pick it up. And we'll move on to the next speaker.
John, you going to take it? Sure. Right button advances.
Okay.
You're on.
I'm on? Okay. I've kind of done this in about 3 segments, so 15 minutes, 5 minutes for each segment. I got a little bit of administrative things to clean up with the co-pilots, and then a little bit about our normal operations, and then talking a little bit about kiting phenomena and so forth. So I'll talk fast because I've got a lot of stuff here, but stop me if you have any questions.
You have the mic a little closer to you.
Okay, how's that? Okay, very good. This season, we've got a few extra or new qualified tow pilots. Here there's the list. We've lost a couple to inactivity and so forth, but here are our tow pilots for the year, and there are a couple more in the works to add to the list. Okay, there they are. 12 of us, and we'll be doing most of the towing. And like I say, there are a couple more people that we always need tow pilots. So anybody that wants to become a tow pilot, get in the pipeline, meet with me, look at the operations manual and see what the qualifications and basic club qualifications are and so forth. Springtime's the best time to work with everyone, so bug me if you want to get flying, and we'll get it done. Everything's in the operations manual. You can contact me at jkmock@compuserve.com, and then the best thing to do is to fill out the flight time summary sheet. It's located in the appendix of the operating manual, and all this information is all available online. And the authorized tow pilots to work with are me, John Mockamer, Bob Jackson, Mike Smith, and Willie Hackett. However, Willie is not yet a U.S. CFI, so he cannot sign off the tow pilot endorsement in the logbook, so one of the other guys will have to do that. All right, in the operations manual, just some administrative things for the tow pilots to remember. 61.69 requirements within the last 24 calendar months before the flight has made at least 3 actual or simulated glider tows while accompanied by a qualified pilot who meets the requirements of this section, or has made at least 3 flights as pilot in command of a glider towed by an aircraft. So make sure, tow pilots, make sure that you have that in your logbook, because this is an FAA requirement, and it's not. It is a club requirement, but it's between you and the FAA. So just make sure you have that in your logbook, and if not, get together with me, and we'll go out and fly the Cub and do 3 simulated tows with the Cub. Club requirements: recurrent currency training conducted biannually, cycled regardless of other flight checks, and we can do that in conjunction with a flight review if you need a BFR. First hours for free. Additional flight times conducted in accordance with NASA Super Cub rental program. And like I said, please check your logbook for current BFR. And then last time you flew with me, Bob, Mike, or Willie should also be entered in there. And then if you need to do that, try to schedule it as soon as possible. Responsibilities of tow pilots. Responsible for the safe and proper operation of the tow plane and the launch operations. Tow pilots shall be at the field to start operations at 10 a.m. And then with other circumstances, with frontal passages and so forth, you guys may want to depart early, so I have to coordinate that with the tow pilot. Okay, and the tow pilot's primary responsibility manning the tow plane during the period. However, it is expected that others will give the pilot periodic relief in the interest of minimizing fatigue. And remember, you get on a hot summer day, it's a long time to be sitting in a tow plane. So other tow pilots that are on the field, give the guy a break. Bring him some water. Dehydration is a big one when you're talking hot summer days as well. Nothing in the instructions should be interpreted as a substitute of good judgment for each individual pilot. No case should any master tow pilot feel induced to provide towing services under conditions which are perceived as being beyond his or her basic piloting skills or beyond the capabilities of the equipment. Everybody's got different limitations, personal limitations, so by all means, stay within your limitations, and by all means, stay within the club limitations on winds, which we will talk about in just a minute. Threat area management, always ask yourself, what is my threat and how can I manage that threat? And take action to do so. Operation in windy conditions, we're going to see some more windy conditions over the next couple months. So wind gusts above 17 knots require a person each tip of the club gliders and an additional person on the tail of 233. Steady wind gusts exceeding 22 knots, club gliders must return to the hangar. And steady winds gusts reaching 30 knots, tow planes shall be returned to the hangar. Towing guidelines. It should be emphasized that the priorities governing massive towing operations are to be observed strictly in the order listed. Safety, always safety first. Care of the club equipment, and then expeditious service. And one of the things we are looking at is how to increase the tempo of our operations and get more operations during the day. So when you're towing, and depending on what altitude you release, you're generally going to take the glider upwind, whatever altitude you release. Plan your arrival back into the traffic pattern in a timely fashion, consistent with cool down of the engine and so forth, to get back on the ground for the next launch. Also, a lot of times what happens is we'll have a number of training flights in the morning, and then we have a lull in the activity, and the gas tank's about half full. And a lot of times the tow pilot will just park the tow plane, and then all of a sudden we have a lot of activity at 1 o'clock, and we take 2 tows, and the next thing we know, the tow plane's off getting fueled up. So try to plan the day out accordingly. You get that little lull in activity, even though you still have half a tank. Go ahead and fill up, top off. Then you're ready for the big push in the afternoon.
It only takes half as long.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Pre-flighting, the airplane's tow plane is responsible for a thorough pre-flight inspection. Remember to check the tow hook and release mechanism. Right for the tossed manual, we have their recommendation. Does the release hook open completely, i.e. until it touches the ring? And here's the important part. When the release cable in the cockpit is pulled to fullest extent. So what I've seen on the field a lot of times is guys will hook up the ring, and then with their left hand they push the release and make sure it releases, and then they put it back in. Well, that really doesn't satisfy the requirement. We really need to have the pilot pull the handle to make sure that the cable from the tow release to the release handle is functioning like it should. And make sure that, like it says here, that the handle actually touches the ring when the pilot pulls the handle. It takes 2 people to do it. So a pilot can't do that on a pre-flight. It has to be when the operation begins. Let's see. When you and then the next thing is when you let go of the release cable, does the release hook return completely to the closed position? And you should see on the tail of the airplane, you should see a little bit of slack in the cable for the release. Because according to TOST, it only takes a couple millimeters to take that release over top dead center and make the release. So it's if there's any tension when it's fully released, that's not a good thing. The handle should be fully engaged, and there should be a little bit of slack in the release cable itself. So that's the second thing you want to check. And then the third thing you really want to check is will it release when it's under load? So again, we do that with the gliders a lot of times. We'll hold the rope, pull on the rope, and have the release handle pulled. Make sure that it does release with a load on it. Yes, sir?
I have a question. How many times is this actually being done? Because I don't recall this ever being done.
That's why I'm going over it.
Well, should it be part of the daily check of the operations?
It really should be. Yeah. As the first hookup, this needs to be done. Because like I say, the tow pilot can't do it himself when he pre-flights the airplane. It does take two people. And this came right out of the manual. We have a new hitch on 99Z, and this came right out of the manual that came with that. Actually, it's not a new hitch; it's a overhauled hitch. Okay. And the next thing that we do want to make sure of is the release free of dirt. Toast says that that can interfere with the release mechanism greatly as well. And we'll get to this on the next page. One of the other items, and I think everybody on the line knows the difference between, the double ring Toast hitch. I think that's all we have on our ropes now. We don't have any Schweitzer rings.
If you have the right end of the rope attached.
Yeah, if you have the right end of the rope attached, of course. Yeah. So, and if you look at it closely, I think that ring will actually have a part number stamped on it. Yes. Care and cleaning, regular cleaning, servicing is imperative for maintaining the required security level during operation, especially when landing away from paved runway, which we do all the time. Your release is exposed to dirt and pollution, so it's important to check the release before and at the end of every flight operation and clean it if necessary. So that really means that after landing and the tow plane comes up, when you put the cane on the rope, take a look at the hitch, make sure it's not full of mud. Springtime, if we get landing in the grass too early, it'll throw a lot of mud and dirt up onto the release. So just take a cursory look every time you hook the cane up to make sure that it appears clean and fully functioning. If the release is hard to operate, Tost says that you can just wash it down with water and then dry it, and then they say to use WD-40 to lubricate. It's just a light lubricant, and it's non-acidic and won't pick up dirt and so forth. And that should be checked at the end of the day as well when the tow plane is cleaned down. Okay, operations-wise, we want to standardize as much as possible the way we do our business. Now, so I got another marker here. Ground crew, as the tow plane comes up and makes a sweeping turn, it shows it close to the nose of the glider, but we really shouldn't be more than like a wing length away from the glider. Make a sweeping turn in front of the glider. The ground handler should position himself over in this area with the cane and lift up the rope in the cane, and then as the tow plane taxis into position, walk over maybe mid-wing on the right-hand side and just stand there. There's a couple people that will, when the end of the rope starts to get close, they'll snatch it up. Well, then from the glider or from the tow plane, we can't see how much slack is there. So just stand stationary and let the tow plane pull it out. He's looking in the mirror and he'll see the ball that's on the end of the tow rope approach the nose of the glider, and he'll stop with a couple 10 feet of slack still in. So he'll get very close to getting all the slack out initially. But if you snatch it and it's all piled up in a pile, he has no idea, and then we waste a lot of time just taking the slack out once we get hooked up. So try to resist doing that. Yeah, the tow pilot will see the ball and the rope approach the front of the glider and have all but about 10 feet of the slack taken out. At that time, the rope will be stretched from the nose over a little bit and then to the tail of the tow plane, which if you have a little bit of a kink in the rope leading to the tow plane, then again the tow pilot can see in the mirror as the slack comes out and apply the brakes and stop just as all the slack is out rather than to just snatch the glider. So just a little bit of a kink will help him do his job. Okay.
Question.
Yes.
It occurs to me we'll have to, when they're getting the snagging the rope with the cane, that just for a second, make sure the tow pilot comes to a complete stop. We can get down our hands and knees when there's mud flying up from underneath and take a look at it.
You're talking about when you pick up the rope?
Yes.
Okay. The tow when the tow pilot sees the ground handler come over to the tail of the airplane, he should back off on the throttle to idle, so he's not making a lot of blowing a lot of wind and debris and so forth up on the person that's driving the rope. you really shouldn't have to get down on your hands and knee. A cursory look at the tow mechanism to make sure there's just not a bunch of debris and.
But if there's
so
mud,
forth.
it's going to come up from underneath.
Yeah, if
So we do have to get on our hands and knees, which is okay. I don't mind doing it.
it's going to be splattered around. I mean, you should. First of all, we shouldn't be landing on the grass when it's muddy. In the springtime, that's the other key to this, is to land on the asphalt. If you start to see some muds coming up, maybe on the bottom of the wings and so forth, then certainly move the operation to the hardtop. And then yeah, if you do see that the release is fouled with debris, get in there and check the mechanism to make sure it's still free and clean it if necessary. What's that?
Or just wear your work keys.
Or if the handler comes up and they're covered with mud, you know, it's...
Yeah. Okay. All right, takeoff. Here we have a little bit of confusion, and I think somebody else might be talking about this a little later on, but this comes right from the operations manual. So the tow pilot's going to look back, confirm the glider's wings are still level, and make the tow plane the takeoff announcement, glider in tow. Now, what I like to do on this announcement, I like to do it just as I'm taking the slack out, because I have a hard time thinking about two things at once. I don't want to do it when I'm ready to take off and running the power up and so forth. So I usually make that announcement a little bit early, just to get it done, out of the way, and then I'm ready for the launch, and I can have all my attention on the launch. So so that's made. Initiate a wag of the rudder and witness a return rudder wag from the glider. So the tow pilot will wag the rudder, and it's very difficult from the tow plane, especially the Super Cub, to see the wag from the glider. So generally we are depending on, as tow pilots, we're depending on the wing runner to verify that. He verifies the wag of the tow plane, the wag of the glider, the traffic pattern is safe, and everything's good to go, and then he signals the launch. Yes?
Just because I've seen it, there's a difference between a rudder wag and a rudder wag. And for those of you who don't know the difference, that I'm going to come see. But what happens a lot of times, I've noticed this, is that on the takeoff, the tow plane does a rudder wag instead of one to a deliberate.
Okay.
And so I would encourage that when we do this, and also I tell my students, slowly back, for your point, so everybody knows what's going on. But as you guys know, for those who don't know, waggle means the tow plane's telling you there's something wrong back there.
Okay.
And usually that happens in the air, but sometimes when they do this, you don't know.
Yeah.
I would just encourage
A nice deliberate wag of the rudder. Okay.
Plus, the student or the pilot actually sees that. They don't see a little rudder wag. Sometimes you just don't
Yeah.
see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true. I saw it.
Yeah.
A little.
Okay. But from the tow pilot perspective, just realize that once the wing runner signals the launch, that wing runner has verified both the wag from the tow plane and the wag from the glider. Okay. Confirm the wing runner is also signaling readiness to begin the launch. Apply full power deliberately but not too rapidly. There may be some slack remaining in the rope. And then with the 233, of course, a little bit slower application of power so that the tail doesn't bang on the initial ground roll. And remember, PA-18 is very difficult to observe the wing. I put waggle, I should have put wag, sorry, Lance. my ignorance. Okay. On the climb out, just some basics here. Primary requirements for the towing operation are to maintain correct and constant attitude. Avoid maneuvers and attitudes which are inconsistent with the experience of the glider pilot. So know who is behind you and what glider is behind you. Unless a fully experienced pilot is in the glider, turns should be restricted to back angles 20 degrees or less. With student on tow, turning should be held to a minimum consistent with safety. Delay the turnout of the traffic until passing altitude of 300 feet, but prior to 400 feet. And this has to be balanced a little bit with the conditions at the field. Bob and I were talking yesterday a little bit about this. When you have a strong westerly wind coming over the ski slope, you get a lot of turbulence and burbles over the end of the runway. I generally like to start a little bit of an early turn, and that will then enable, if we have a rope break, for the glider to simply make a right turn back into the wind and get back to the field without too much difficulty. But you know, that has to be talked about beforehand as well. But in general, 300 feet prior to 400 feet. You can also move a little bit to the right to move away from the noise-sensitive house that's off the end of the runway, and instead of turning inside of that house, turning on the outside of that house. And it all depends on the wind. We want to keep the gliders upwind as much as possible, and not fly downwind. So when we've got a downwind departure, we certainly don't want to take them straight out downwind too far. We want to get back into the wind as soon as we can, as soon as practical. Okay, release. From the tow pilot's perspective, verify release before turning. You don't have to turn right away. Just verify that, okay, the glider is off. I felt the release, or I thought I felt the release, and now I see in the mirror that the glider is in fact in a turn, leaving my position. Now it's time to make the turn. So we don't want to make that turn too fast, but we want to make a 90-degree turn and then fly away from the release point to prevent both airplanes coming back to the same release point. Cool down phase of the flight. Descent cool down should be done with engine speed at or slightly above 2,200 feet. So generally, we bring the nose down, build up the airspeed, and then just bring the power back a couple hundred RPMs, certainly above 2,200 RPMs. It's that first minute or so of cool down that's the most important. And the fact that you've brought the nose down and decreased the load on the engine, it's going to cool, even at high power settings, and you don't want to have it cool too fast. So keeping a high RPM initially is important with that in mind. Make a timely return for landing consistent with cool down requirements and safe operation. Like Glenn was saying, start planning how you're going to enter back into the pattern, and then we want to get the airplane back on the ground and ready for the next launch in as timely a fashion as possible. Okay, now get into a little bit about tow plane upset phenomena. Over the years, there has been many tow plane accidents have resulted from tow plane upsets, and we were reminded last year that there was an accident not too far from here. The final results of that haven't been published, so I don't want to make speculation about causes and so forth. But that's what really kind of got us focused on this phenomena, which is a very dangerous phenomena. We think of the box. And the instructors will talk about the box in terms of safe operation of the glider, and we're all cognizant of this. We don't want to get too high, we don't want to get too low, or we don't want to get too far off to the side and so forth, and we stay within those safety limits. But this phenomenon, the main cause of the upsets, is not just a matter of getting outside of the box, it's a matter of the glider actually kiting. And the kiting is simply, it's a momentary inattention of the glider attitude followed by a very fast occurring undesired aerodynamic reaction. And we'll talk about what exactly happens in these events. And here's one setup, and there's a number of setups for these. Yes, sir?
Hey, John, would you go back a slide, please? This is you probably copied this. This is an old slide which shows that upper box position very high.
Okay.
No, that's way too high.
All right.
From an instructor.
At least when I'm towing, the top of that box is here.
On his way.
Yeah.
Not above.
Okay.
I mean, this is your FAA at work. I would agree.
Fix it, Lance.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, probably is. I cut and paste. Here's one setup, and this is a normal tow. The glider is following the path of the tow plane. The nose of the glider is basically pointed to the outside wingtip, and everybody's happy. So here's where the glider got a little bit inside the turn, and the rope slacks. You get a little bit of slack in the rope. So to compensate, the glider pilot then turns outside, which essentially slingshots the glider around and increases the airspeed. Well, we all know what happens when we increase airspeed. We increase lift on the wings, and the nose naturally wants to go up as a result of that. And we generally have to push forward on the stick to keep the nose where we want it. If we're not paying attention, then that can get away from us very, very quickly. This is where, in this setup, this is where the event really begins. The upset begins with increased speed of the glider. See, it goes here from 55 knots, 65, 75, 80 knots. And this whole progression takes less than 3 seconds to happen. So 1001, 1002, 1003. Extremely fast. Essentially, what's happened is the tow plane has become the winch of a winch launch. And if you've ever done a winch launch, if you haven't done a winch launch, most of you probably have flown kites at some time. You get out in a strong breeze and you have your buddy hold the kite and let the kite go, and the kite just flies right up above us. That's the phenomena that we're talking about. And from this attitude, when the tow plane gets pointed down, it could take up to 1,500 feet to recover. Now notice the speed increases 50, 55, 65, 75, 80, and altitude increases of the glider by about 200 feet. All of that energy that glider picked up can only come from one source, and it's right here in the tow plane. The tow plane's airspeed now has been virtually brought down below flying speed, while the tail's been brought up and the airplane's pointed down towards the ground. So you can see that it's going to take quite a bit of altitude to recover from this position. We have one tow pilot.
How high can he get that tail before you can't release him?
Well, with the tossed tow hooks, we should be able to release him. With the Schweitzer, that is an issue.
Okay, so I know a tow pilot that lost his life because he couldn't release.
Yeah, and that's why we put the tossed hooks on there.
More often than not, it's that they don't have time to release.
And that's really the key. You've only got 2 or 3 seconds to make that decision and make the release.
That's typically takeoff right there.
Where
the glider is maybe 10 feet above the ground in your point D, and the tow plane's 5 feet above the ground. And by the time that happens, everything's all over.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't even have time to move your foot back to hit the release, much less reach down and grab it.
And that's one reason we're moving the releases up closer to the throttle, and I'll show you that in a minute.
Doesn't the PSI also affect the release?
The weak link?
If the glider's going high and faster, and that increasing the PSI on the actual,
Oh, yes.
It can make it a lot harder to release?
Yes, because, but that's why we have the tossed tow hook on there, which will release even at increased load.
Yeah, the old Schweitzers, when that happened, you're right, it was almost impossible to release.
Yeah.
But if we did low tow, we wouldn't have this problem. Low tow is much better.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, sir.
With this diagram, just to kind of get a sense of your perspective, when do you think you would be maximally deflected on your elevator in that sequence?
It's hard to tell. I have never been through one of these. Now, there's one tow pilot in this room that found himself right about like that one day. Luckily, he was at 1,500 feet over Frederick, and talking to Bob. Yeah, talking to Bob about that.
With a student in the K7.
Yeah, and what you said to me was how quick it happened, and that's the key. It can happen very, very quickly. Okay. So here's this is I just put this slide in here because this is a winch launch, and if you notice, what they do on a winch launch is they pull the glider to get airspeed, and then as it goes up, they begin to reduce the winch power. So they're pulling it in slower. And that's why the PSI on the rope goes up like you're saying, because we're simply just flying along, and the glider's then putting the load on it. So, okay. Upset begins to a plane as much as 1,500 feet to recover. So we never want to get, obviously, in that position. Okay. Additional risk factors, just things to think about. Glider towed from a CG hook. It's going to make it easier for that phenomena to happen. Aggressive pitch up of the tow plane. We want to be smooth and deliberate when we make pitch changes of the tow plane. So, in other words, we don't want to allow the glider to get behind us, get low, and then pitch up aggressively to try to catch up to us. So we want to make that nice and smooth. Gliders with high set wings relative to the tow hook, 233. Gliders with low wing loading, usually older or vintage gliders. Turbulent conditions, especially if associated with strong wind gradient. Glider pilots with low hours and or aero tow experience. Lightweight pilots, aft CG conditions. So we want to make sure when we go solo in these airplanes that we don't have an aft CG condition and the trim is set properly. We don't want to be surprised right after takeoff. Complacency. This happens to high time experienced pilots, and that's what's kind of disturbing. Sometimes when we get a lot of experience in flight time, we kind of have that attitude that, well, we can do 6 things at one time. You know, we can be flying the airplane, we can be looking for lift over here, or we can be doing this, or we can pick up something that we dropped off the floor. What?
Tune in the radio.
Tune in the radio.
Or just in a video camera.
Or how about a selfie? Yeah. You know, all those things take a couple seconds to do, and that's the complacency that we have to fight. Always fight. Distractions, eyes. So eyes on the tow plane to 1,500 feet. That's if you consider that the critical time from launch to 1,500 feet. Eyes always on the tow plane. How long does it take to pick something up on the floor, look around for lift, or take a selfie? 2 or 3 seconds, and that's really all we're talking about is 2 or 3 seconds, and that's where complacency. You know, the new pilot that's out there by themselves for the first number of tows, I mean, their eyes are like pie plates, and they're looking at the tow plane.
Hopefully they're looking for traffic too.
Yeah, but it's after, you know, 100 flights or 500 flights or 10 years or 20 years that we get a little bit more comfortable, and then we relax a little bit, and that's where the danger can come in. Okay, so how do we minimize this threat? And we all share responsibility for minimizing the threat. The club's got responsibilities, tow pilots, glider pilots, and observing members. From the club's perspective, maintain the tow plane's release hitches. 99 Zulu has a newly overhauled release on it now, and 58 Lima will as we get 99 Zulu back online. 99 Zulu has a new tow release located near the throttle lever, soon to be followed by 58 Lima, and then train pilots and glider pilots in recognition and avoidance. Here's the I just took this yesterday, this picture. This is where the release will be. Here's the throttle, here's the release. The cable's not hooked up yet. I ordered the cable the other day, but that'll be right there. So it'll be within about 8 inches of the throttle. So that'll be good. So we haven't come up with a solution yet for the PA-18, and that one kind of bothers me because sitting in the back seat, I can't even see the release. So
a lot of them put them in the center of the panel. I've seen those.
Yeah.
Like they do with the photography, they just put it in the center.
Uh-huh.
So that might be an option, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yes?
I always liked it so that it was on the floor just behind your left foot, so all you had to do was take your left foot off the rudder to hit the release.
Yeah. Oh, you could do it with your foot.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the back of your leg just hits the release.
Uh-huh. Yes.
And some of the English clubs, they have a rope from the top of the cockpit going down to the release, so it's just a lanyard you can grab a hold of and pull.
Yeah, that may be something we look at for the PA-18. Maybe run it up and run it back, so either pilot would have access. Yeah, I think Willie was telling me that. I'd like to see some pictures. If anybody sees one of those, take a picture, please. Okay, all right, tow pilots. From our perspective, maintain personal proficiency, both club and FAA requirements met. Familiarize with where the tow release is located and verify it can be reached while towing. One of the things I worry about in the Super Cub is you get your belts all tightened down, and now you find yourself with a stick fully in your lap. Are you really going to be able to lean over and even access the release? So you want to make, yeah, when you're staring at the ground, you want to make sure that you can reach the release. And like I say, the release is changing in the Pawnees, so we want to make sure that you know where the release is in the airplane when you're flying it. Pre-flight tow plane hitch each day. Follow up on any issues that are noted, so we can get them repaired. Know who and what glider is being towed. Watch for early signs of an upset and take action immediately. Can't stress that more. Is take action immediately when something's not right. Avoid abrupt pitch, bank changes. While glider is boxing the wake, do not apply full rudder. Only apply approximately 3/4 rudder and allow the glider then to yaw the tow plane, because there have been upsets of lateral offsets as well. The tow plane gliders gets out of position or boxing the wake. The tow pilot's trying to keep the airplane straight by applying the rudder, and next thing you know, the rudder plane itself stalls, which gives a violent yaw action in the airplane. Okay, release glider immediately if any of the following occur. You reach full deflection of any control in an effort to maintain control of the tow plane. Nose of the tow plane passes through the horizon while you're trying to resist the movement. Unusually rapid stick movement is required to keep the aircraft pitch from decreasing to a nose-low attitude. Sharp, rapid, or uncommanded yaw or pitch change of the tow plane. And the thing to remember here is there's always the thought, gee, I don't want to let that glider go at 200 feet or 100 feet above the ground. In Fairfield, I could let you go, I could turn you loose at any altitude and you could make a safe landing. So that shouldn't be an issue. And that certainly shouldn't delay the decision by any amount of time in that situation. Okay, glider pilots, verify CG loading of the glider in the trim setting, minimize distractions. You have only one job while on tow, and that's to stay in position with the tow plane. So make that, consider the first 1,500 feet of the tow to be particularly critical, and commit to not taking your eyes off the tow plane during that critical period. If your eyes are on the tow plane, you're not going to kite. It's really that simple. It's when you lose sight of the tow plane, and it's really not, when these events happen, it's not that the glider simply watched the tow plane go down. It's more that the pilot is doing something else, and when they look back, the tow plane is gone. That's the key. So keep your eyes on the tow plane during this critical period. Yes, sir.
Can I make a comment?
Mm-hmm.
I was taught, if you ever lose sight of the tow plane, release. And I used to follow that. I've taught students this, but after that fatal accident at our neighboring club, I was corrected. And the correction was, anytime you see that tow pilot in a place he shouldn't be, you should be considering what your plan is, because it might be best to release.
Mm-hmm.
You're always probably in a better shape than he is.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. If you lose the tow plane, release immediately, or if you see the tow plane in a position that they shouldn't be in. Ground crew, observing members. Conduct operations in a standardized method as outlined in the operations manual. Review the manual as needed. Minimize distractions to the pilots who are preparing to fly. Avoid getting them out of their established routines. We have, as an airline pilot, we consider the time from we move the airplane on its own power to 10,000 feet as a critical phase of flight, and we don't do anything other than that job. So when we're getting ready for flights and so forth, we all have our own routine we go through, and you get distracted, and it's very easy to get off those routines. So avoid getting people out of their routine by minimizing the distractions as they prepare. Observe operations and speak up if you have concerns. We're all human, therefore we will make mistakes. It's what we do. Early detection, correction, and/or compensation to our mistakes is paramount to maintaining safe operation. Okay. All right, and finally, just the tow pilot checklist. Please make sure BFR current club recurrent training is up to date, currency on 9169, and then schedule as needed. Review the PA18, PA25 manuals. They're online. And then fill out the knowledge test for both airplanes. This is open book and a good review. We should each be doing this every year, just mainly as a review for our knowledge to get us back up to speed. have a safe season.
Thank you.
Tom, you want to talk for a few minutes? Please speak quickly.
So good morning, everybody. Anybody who doesn't know, my name is Tom Jones, and I've been recently appointed as the Chief Operations Director. We're making this up this year, so hold the microphone closer. Hold the microphone closer. Okay. So quickly, why does MASA even have an OD?
Right button.
It's to ensure the operation runs safely, that's first, smoothly, that's next, and to mentor the AOD and other club members. The OD is like the pilot in command of the whole operation for the whole day. He has help, he has the AOD, and he has members. We're all volunteers here, so you're expected to volunteer to help the OD do the many details that he has to do. And like the PIC of an aircraft, pilot in command, the OD has to have situational awareness through the whole day. So is something not quite right? This was last Sunday, so things do happen. So I would recommend that everybody, AODs and ODs, reread the operations manual at the beginning of the year. There's a lot in there. Do we need an OD on every day? And the answer is yes, especially on unscheduled days. You have to agree on it in the morning, and if you're going to hand it off, it has to be handed off to a person who agrees to take the duty. So the OD will has personnel, the OD, the tow pilot, the AOD, the equipment, which is the OD notebook here, and 2 inspected ropes, the radio, weight bag, cane, flag, cone, all that stuff has to get transported. The OD makes calls to Weather Brief and Potomac Tracon every scheduled day, and makes the TFR calls if there is a TFR for that day. Then we're asking the OD to do a pilot brief on scheduled days, which would have the NOTAMs, the TFR brief, the weather, and any ops brief. Like, for instance, the grass fields are very wet. We don't want to land on those today because we'll make ruts. That's the ops brief. So if the TFR is activated, the OD has to make the 5 calls, do the pilot brief, do the glider pilot brief, and everybody who flies that day should be on the list for the TFR. And all of these things are on the website if you want to review them. There's a wealth of information there. So rigging areas, we want to rig on the outside of the on the outside of the taxiway and near the fence. And then the glider staging areas are in red there next to the runway, but not on the runway. So
What's the blue area?
That was supposed to be vehicle parking.
Okay.
And this is a little out of date because the gazebo has moved. But basically, vehicle parking is on the outside of the taxiway, or a couple of vehicles on the other side, but certainly out of the way of the operation. And if a vehicle comes along and OD doesn't like where it's placed, the OD can say, please move. That's what his job is. So,
Is it considered to be uphill of the anchor chain, parking next to the gazebo?
yeah, that would be a good rule of thumb. So this slide I would have changed to say the pilot qualifications. For one is the pilot current for the club and the glider. We'll see the next slide. Has he had SFRA training? For new people, you have to do that to fly in this area. Is he on the TFR list if he's going to fly for the TFR? And if there's a guest rider, then he has to get a guest waiver signed. So for recurrent training, this hasn't changed. So you have to have a field orientation if you're new to the field. If you get a check-in in a Massa glider, it's good for 24 calendar months. You have to get checked out in each place. If a member has not flown a glider for 3 months, he must get a ride with an instructor before operating a club glider. If a member has not flown in 6 months, he must get a supervised flight. Anyway, so if a glider, if a pilot isn't flown in 6 months, even if he's flying a private glider, he has to get a check out with an instructor. And then, again, all pilots have to complete the special flight rules training online. You get a little card, it lasts forever, but you need to do it before you fly this year. So the AOD makes sure the flights are recorded, and it's important that we do that because we charge money for how high the tows were, who flew that day, and we want to know that everybody came back that day. So on the priority list before noon, student pilots with instructors are first, student pilots without instructors, solo students are second. And then I think we also allow the guys going on a badge will get some priority to that. Afternoon, it's supposed to be the priority on the tow list. And we're supposed to grid at least 2 gliders, assuming there are 2 gliders, and they should be ready to go. They should have gone through their own checklist. We should take the tail dollies off and be ready to go in the grid. So at least 2 gridded and ready, as opposed to gridded and sitting there. And then a glider which chooses not to fly or has equipment problems should be moved out of the way so as not to impede the rest of the operation. The radio, the OD should always have a handheld radio on his or her person, because you never know when you're going to want to make a quick call on a situation that arises. So as we saw in the scene, the tow plane goes past the glider to hook up, and the wing runner hooks the glider up. And just make sure not to stand in front of a glider that's hooked up or allow anyone else, spectator, another person checking something out, whatever, to stand in front of a hooked up glider.
And it said no prior to instructional student flights. Is that different from instructional flights? For example, would a private pilot was going for a commercial rating be considered to be a student? Would a checkout in a glider be considered?
No, that's for what I'm getting from the chief instructor. We're trying to get the students up is the before noon priority. So to go over a launch, and again, how is your situational awareness right here? So the wing runner should first look for traffic because he has the best view of everybody. Everybody else is facing one way, he can turn around and look. So the glider pilot gives the thumbs up, the wing runner levels the wing, signals take up slack, which shouldn't be much slack if we're following the procedure. And then the wing runner can signal stop. At that time, he should look at the 2 corners of the field to see if anybody snuck in while he wasn't looking. Again, situational awareness. The tow pilot gives the rudder waggle. The glider pilot gives the rudder waggle, which the tow pilot may or may not see, but the wing runner can see, and he can signal to begin launch. So these are the landing patterns. Usually the gliders are on the left and the tow planes are on the right. However, on certain windy days, you might want to land right-hand pattern, and so you certainly announce. And I'm personally in favor of if you're on the left, you land on the left or the center. If you're on the right, you land on the right or the center, that you don't cross at the last minute, because that's where, in that final box here, is where you want to make sure you're not in conflict with another landing airplane or glider. So,
if you are ready to launch and the wing runner spots something, they'll put the wing down.
Yes.
Does the pilot immediately release
tow rope?
Yes is the safe answer. So just so every OD knows, there are already incident procedures written up very carefully. They're in the book here. They're also online. There's the reference. And especially if you do have an incident or an accident, then you're going to want to look at those right away because they tell you exactly what to do. You don't have to make it up as you go along. And the most important thing is stay calm and take charge. So at the closing of the day, so we've been through a whole day, everyone's come around. So is everyone back and accounted for? That's part of the reason we keep the list. And the OD or a designee should stay at the field until everyone is accounted for. So the OD makes sure that the club equipment is returned to the hangars and the other equipment to the club room, and the hangar is packed safely. The OD makes closing calls to Potomac Tracon and the TFR desks if the TFR was open. And the OD will see that the flight data is entered. Doesn't necessarily have to, again, the AOD might do this or another member. So, and then double check the data. And then straighten out the club room, thank your crew, adult beverages optional, and secure the hangars in the club room. By that I mean, if you're about to leave and someone is still hanging out, make sure that they know to lock up or it's their responsibility. So that's it. Any questions?
Yes. Just a quick comment. Over the last couple of presentations, the importance of the wing runners really stands out. And that's a critical role. There's a tendency sometimes to be a low man on the totem pole and do the job and not really know exactly what's involved. So I think that from the earlier tow plane presentation, it's very important. I think it would be a good idea to have a little discussion as part of the pre-brief between the tow pilot and the wing runner from a signals perspective, because that whole tail waggle thing was a little bit of a surprise to me, hearing that, you know, ultimately it should be the wing runner's responsibility to go ahead and launch. And it's just a very critical role. So it's good stuff.
Yes, we are putting more, we're making the wing runner a little more responsible than he might have thought he was. Yes.
Oh, yeah, Tom, I'm going to do my annual thing here. You might have mentioned it when I was indisposed, but of course I know sometimes there's just not enough people out there when we're making this. You'll have the OD actually doing it all. But again, I would encourage the ODs, if there's people standing around, have them do the work as an opportunity, because the OD can't maintain situational awareness about the safety of the field if they're doing it all. Right. And I see a lot of them say, oh, I want to do it so I get exercise. Well, I'm sorry, today you're not going to get your exercise. You know, I just my opinion. So.
Yeah, the OD's job is not to do everything. Yeah. The OD's big job is to be situationally aware of everything that's going on and where the risks and threats are. So, yes.
I want to go back to a question that was asked about if the tow sequence is halted and the glider and the tow plane have not moved, but the slack is, let's say, has been taken up. The wing runner spots traffic in pattern, puts the wing down, and signals a halt to the operation. The necessity for releasing the tow rope. If the tow pilot's not going and the glider's not going, I mean, the glider pilot always has the option, if the wing is down, to pull the rope. Is it really necessary to disengage the rope? I'd like to see more consensus on that, I guess, because I haven't typically seen a lot of that in the case.
Can I comment?
Sure.
I think you're spot on. I think what I do is I keep my hand on the release, and if it goes to hell, you release.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, if you release, then there's this big commotion. You have to move the glider forward.
Exactly, which slows down the tempo. I realize safety
I mean, that may not be the ultimate safety thing to do, but it's practical.
Let's have our chief instructor comment on this.
I think that is a glider pilot's choice, and Danny's absolutely right. You need to have a hand on the release. You need to be watching. But I think more important is when the wing isn't going down and you have a reason not to go. You don't need to be yelling, put the wing down. You need to pull the release.
Yeah.
So if you see something dangerous, don't yell or signal, pull the release, and then nothing bad will happen.
Right.
And likewise, if you stop the operation, the co-pilot always has the option of pulling his release to taxi off the runway, even if the glider hasn't pulled the release.
Thanks, Tom. That was excellent. I would also like to encourage ODs to write little reports and email blast them out to the club. I've really enjoyed that this past year, and most people have been doing it. Please continue. Thanks. You don't want this, Dan?
That's okay. So can anyone hear me okay? So this is another one of those recently created positions without a defined mission statement, so I can make
It'd be
up.
helpful if you use the mic.
Use the mic, please.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
Recording.
Otherwise, we'll just have a video of your pretty face.
That works.
Is that the gun?
Okay, thanks. Is that better?
Thank you.
Yeah, all right, cool. So this is one of those positions recently created, right, Mike? Right, and with no real defined outcomes. So I can make it up as I go along. What I do want to do is give kudos to the existing godfathers that will continue to be godfathers, which is Rich, Bob, Dick, Gary, and Mel. And also, Dave Schober's done keeps on an ongoing basis doing a fantastic job in an official capacity as an A&P, right? So I think basically, is this one here? So a great big thank you, right? And applause like crazy, right? Listen, Mel, he's not here, right?
He is here.
Oh, he is? What's the word? Are you going to do it? Okay, cool. So we thank you, Mel, for your past help and all that. But if someone wants to be the point godfather on the 233, let me know. Otherwise, I'll appoint someone. Okay? All right. You're going to do it?
You get that speaker.
Yeah, I know. I figured that out. Thanks. Okay. So, all right. So, all right. Here's a question. How many? Let's see a show of hands. How many owners in here? Great. Okay. Cool. All right. The rest of you are kind of like renting and all that, right? All right. The renters, right? How many of you rented a car, and how many of you have ever washed a rented car? I know, right? Me too. You need to be studied. I've washed it too. Okay. Anyway, so I've had this conversation a few weeks ago with Mike Higgins, and he captured some of my thoughts in the looks like in the write-up in the president's corner yesterday. You know, really, guys, come on. We rent, but we say that, but really we act as owners in the syndicate, you know, because we do care. We individually care for the equipment, right? I see everybody washing things, right? So really, all members are owners and stakeholders of this club, right? The airport, the facilities, and the equipment, you know, with the K-21s, right? So really, guys, you know, we want to treat these assets with care and pride as though you own them because you do, right? I had a few four-letter words in that when I was talking to Mike, but he more concisely and eloquently communicated in a politically correct manner. Ultimately, we use and fly massive equipment. We're not renters, we're owners. And that's the philosophy that we need to move forward with here, okay? All right, so let's do a little scenario-based training. Oh, I'm sorry, this is another slide. Moving forward, all right, where are we going with this? So I would like to get me and the rest of the Godfathers would like to get some input from the membership on, like, you know, what can we do from a best practice standpoint? Right now, the Godfathers pretty much take it upon themselves to ensure gliders are clean, they're annualed, and little maintenance squawks and everything are taken care of. It's a little bit ad hoc, I think. I think they're doing a great job. I think we want to, I'm not a fan of formalization, but we need something there, okay? Education and training, okay? you know, having just gone through trying to do prep the 102 for annual, I realized that even with my immense gliding experience, you know, that I butchered it, all right? So, you know, and I'm not malicious or anything like that. So I think part of this is that we need to get an education out there. I don't think we can rely on those point people to do everything at the drop of a bucket, okay? So I think the theme we want to go to is more of an education training so we can get more people understanding what it takes to do an annual on equipment and all that. And it's more than just pulling C-pans, right? And we'd like to start thinking about some type of supervised hands-on interactions to that effect, right? That's my thinking here. So look for more information along those lines. Expand qualified maintenance personnel, and please engage the Godfathers, right? The Godfathers are supposed to be the point people for any modifications, changes, or enhancements. I know there's a lot of work going on. People are touching things, doing things. It's all appreciated. But when you do those things, please touch base with the Godfathers so they understand and know, right? Any squawks, any concerns, ideas, right? So I think we want to expand this so everyone has hands-on and they know what they're doing. All right, so now the scenario-based training. All right. The canopy on one of the new Kitty 21s is scratched. It is, actually. And there's a chunk of gel coat or whatever it's called taken out behind the rear canopy. I saw it this morning. All right. Scenario. What do you do? Quick. Call the Godfather. Tell the OD. Tell the OD.
Get your micromesh kit out and start working on it.
Yeah, well, if you know what you're doing, rock and roll, right? But, so, you know, I'm probably the worst person for this position because like, you know, I really try to take care of my glider really well. But, you know, shit happens, right? Forgive, forget. Life is full of misfortune. I don't think we can get too terribly wrapped around the axle. We're a learning environment. Things happen, okay? And I think, you know, we don't want to beat ourselves up too much, okay? So I think we need to accept the fact that stuff's going to happen. However, I think we also have to adopt this attitude. Accidents don't happen to people who take accidents as a personal insult, right? So when things go wrong, right, I think you need to do a little self-reflection and try to figure out why they went wrong and try not, and get that word out, okay? We all have a lot of experience here. Don't be shy about saying, you know what, if you're going to push a glider, make sure your wedding ring is not pushing on the leading edge, okay? Make sure your wristwatch is not laying on the glider, because that kind of stuff chips things, right? And you're not going to learn all that in a quick conversation here, right? But on an ongoing basis, think through these things. And if you had an experience, impart the experience on the next person that's sitting on the line, because they maybe just don't know, right? So I'll leave you with that, right? Yeah.
Well, one thing that should be done is if someone sees a problem with one of these rented gliders, the Godfather should be told about it.
That's right. And
direct.
okay.
Action. He doesn't have to do it himself. He can talk and correct a correction.
Right, and everyone, this is Dick Mott. Dick, he's the Godfather on the 102, right? And he's done a great job. There's and what Dick is saying is that, look, if there's an issue, contact the Godfather, let him know. And Dick, you've taken upon yourself to come out and fix tires and this and that, you know, and an immediate, quick response too. So we got to get that word out, right? So one of the things we will be doing is on an ongoing basis publish the list of Godfathers, email addresses, contact information, right? Because they're not there all the time. I also think what we want to do is expand the maintenance crew of qualified people, so we're not always calling you and saying, hey dude, you know, the tire's flat, come out and fix it, right? So other people can do it. But they need to have some qualifications too in order to do that stuff. We need to develop that qualification, right? Okay? So, yeah. And this is Dick Schober. He's the AMP, so he's... Oh, I'm sorry. Dave Schober. Okay.
The most important thing is if it's a safety of flight item. that it gets communicated. The whole theme of safety is primary. We want to be sure that if there's something that is wrong with a piece of equipment that could impact the safety of flight of that equipment, that's got to be communicated so that the next guy that comes along doesn't find himself in a real problem.
Safety of flight is tantamount. Yeah, Gary?
Yeah, I've been a godfather for 3 or 4 airplanes.
No, he's the godfather for the Pilatus, right?
Yeah, right now the Pilatus. But each time I put a book in every airplane that I've been the godfather for. I hope, I've been expecting every pilot that flies that airplane to put an entry in that book. Just to even put in, I flew this plane today and everything's fine. That's what I want to hear you say. Or, hey, you need to do this. If you don't put any entry in that book, I think everything's fine. I think the Pilatus flew 34 hours and there were 4 entries in that book when I got it ready for the annual.
Yeah, when you do the DI, when you do the DI, you're supposed to write, you know, that you did the DI, the daily inspection at the beginning. And I think Gary's saying even make a notation after you've flown the glider. So these are some things like that we'd like to move towards, right? We're not going to.
I'm not talking about the maintenance logbook. It's just the book in the airplane.
Right.
They say I DI'd it today. Good.
Right. So those are some things I think we want to move to, right? We're not going to be perfect, right? But I think we need to start moving in that direction. And to Dave's point, you know, it's safety of flight is of tantamount importance, okay? So I've taken up much too time. Who wants to go flying today? It's a freaking beautiful day. I do, so let's crank through this. Oh, okay, real quick. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to do this new member indoctrination thing, but we're not doing it today. Who wants to do it tomorrow? Does anyone want to do it tomorrow? I'll send an email out. Anyone wants to do it tomorrow, we'll do it tomorrow. If not, we'll just do it in April for the next one, right?
Thanks, Danny. Excellent. Yeah, I disagree. I think you're perfect for the job, Danny. Kathy, do you want to do a wrap-up?
Yes. I have 2:11, right? What is that, 6 minutes?
Well, you have 6 minutes, but you can take extra 5.
Okay, so I have a whole list here that you're not going to hear, and the parts that I think are important will go into the convector, because we're going to try to be done by 11 so we can get the business meeting done. I want to thank you for coming. We have a lot of people who aren't here. They don't understand the meaning of the word mandatory. They will have some makeup abilities, but I think being here gives you added understanding, so I'm glad you're here. Reminding you to sign in. However, what you missed, I have your names, so I know what you missed. Okay, so I have something safety related that is good news. Really good news, really, really important, and I rarely hear it said in this kind of meeting, and that is, I want you to fly as much as you possibly can. There is nothing, well, there are many things, but this is something that really makes you safer. The more you fly, or put the other way, if you fly very little, it makes you dangerous. And you need to remember that if your hours are way down and you're flying with us once or twice a year, your hours, we used to say 50 hours or less was not enough. I'm challenging you, if you don't have 10 hours, you are probably dangerous. And you need to face that. And I don't care if you've been flying as long as I have, that you're the best instructor, whatever. Of course, our instructors are flying all the time, so they don't have that problem. But
10 hours a year?
well, 50 hours a year is what we used to say it took to be really current, not just legal. There are very few of us who get 50 hours a year, but I'm telling you, if you don't get 10, I'm really worried about you. And we have people who come once or twice a year and jump in a glider and fly. This is not the best way to be safe. But what I'm saying to you is please fly as much as possible. The more you're in a plane flying, the safer you're going to be. And I think the instructors would agree with that, right? Okay. Because I can't read you this whole list, I'm going to say this to you. Please read the convector and Soaring magazine at least the safety articles. There have been some excellent articles, and I am constantly coming into people who say to me, when I say, oh, did you see that article? They say, I don't read Convector. I don't read Soaring. You get Soaring, you have to, because you're a member of this club. You get the Convector on the website. We'll find it for you. Please read them. It's the one place where we can all know the same things. There are excellent articles going into both of those. Instructors are writing now every month something safety related for you to read. Also, I suggest that you read the National Transportation Safety Board summaries. It really keeps you alert. You can think about, now, how would I have done this, or why would I not have this happen to me? Don't read why they say it would happen, because that's useless. They say loss of control. You know, but think about, why did this happen? I was reading some last night and thinking, oh, I wish all my students could be thinking of this. And I say to our experienced pilots and our instructors, including me, note how often the accident happened to the experienced pilot and instructor. We are not immune. In fact, we have a special risk. Read the Soaring Safety Foundation information. It's on the web. You can get through it through our website, through the SSA website. They have really excellent things on there. Read the scenarios and think about them. Do I need to back up? Okay, I'm going to end with this. So Tom Knopf likes to call this time of year, does anybody know what he calls it? The silly season. Now, we've been lucky because we've been flying all winter, some of us. But he noticed an increase in craziness in flights because of low time hours. We know how to fly, but the little finesse maybe is gone. So be extra careful. Listen to the things that you're being told. Take a dual flight if you want. But remember that this season is particularly at risk. I think with that, I'm going to stop. Do you want anybody to ask anything?
Thank you, Kathy. I think it was an excellent safety session, really a lot crammed into 2 hours. So thank all you guys who put that together. Thanks a lot.